Welcome, Deb, and
Thanks,
I appreciate
Joan.
you coming in, and I know you've been here quite often. It's
I
just nice
love
to have you.
coming.
Well, thank you. We really enjoy having you on our program. Uh, I was going to start talking about something else this morning. However, I got out my Argus leader to wake up with my cup of coffee, and last week we had Dr. Jill Cruz as our guest host, and Dr. Cruz was talking about programs that address stress in healthcare providers. And son of a gun, the Argus Leader has an article on Dr. Cruz this morning. So if you listened to her last week, if you get your Argus this morning, go to the Sioux Falls Business Journal, and you will. It's a section in the Argus, and there's a nice article about Dr. Cruz.
Yeah, right on page 3 there. It's a great picture, too.
It is.
Yeah.
Tell me what you know about her work with this.
I love Dr. Cruz. She actually has the office right across the hall from me, and we spend a lot of time bouncing ideas and thoughts off of each other, and she's just a great and thoughtful clinician, and she's a fantastic partner that way. But I'm really excited about this work that she's doing, raising awareness among healthcare providers about the subject of burnout, because everybody is at risk for burnout, but there's particularly high rates in physicians and healthcare providers because of the culture and because of the nature of the work that we do. So Avera and Dr. Cruz and the program that they have to help try to address that, raise awareness, change the culture, address the issue, help people through that problem, is just really a wonderful thing.
Well, I appreciate your comments on it because she was certainly an advocate and has done a lot of work addressing
really
this
has.
and making doctors aware of it.
Yeah.
Well, we know one of the most important. I know one of the most important things in your heart when it comes to medicine is immunizations.
Oh,
and
it is.
a lot of times people think, "Oh, that's kids," and I don't have any little kids anymore. Immunizations are just as important for adults. I think what we're going to do is take our first break, and when we come back, all you adults listening, be ready to hear all about the immunizations that are important for your health.
Clear.
Welcome back to Prairie Doc Radio. We're happy to have you listening today. Dr. Homa is unable to join us, so we're happy to welcome Dr. Deb Johnston, a family practice physician with the Avera Medical Group Brookings. Dr. Johnston, just before the break, I mentioned your interest in immunizations.
Oh yes, I love to give people shots. My poor nurse is always drawing up shots and giving people shots. It's one of my passions. So, and a lot of people think that we even have a term, we call it baby shots, but immunizations are important throughout your life, and certainly people get a lot more immunizations in childhood up until college age. But there are immunizations that you need well into adulthood. The obvious example there is the tetanus shot. We all know or have heard about tetanus, which is certainly a lethal disease, even in the United States. Even in 2016, if you actually contract tetanus, your death rate is very high from that. So preventing tetanus with your tetanus shot is a really good thing. And we recommend that just as routine vaccination, somebody get their tetanus shot every 10 years, although there's certainly circumstances where we would give it to you more often if you were in a car accident or there's some other kind of high-risk injury. The tetanus shot has traditionally been bundled with the diphtheria vaccination. Diphtheria is a bacterial infection that causes a terrible throat infection that is also very dangerous to people. But in the last 10 or 15 years, we've realized that pertussis, whooping cough, which we've always thought of as a childhood disease, actually has a huge reservoir, a huge component of infection in adults, and adults don't get the characteristic that little kids
Whoop.
do. I know. I practiced that. So we didn't recognize it for a very long time. But if you think back, those of us that are a little older, we see outbreaks periodically of whooping cough in older children particularly. And if you think back maybe 10, 12 years, Joan, you might remember an outbreak of whooping cough in the middle school. And we recognize that adults are still susceptible to whooping cough. And so about 10, 15 years ago, they came out with an adult vaccination with the tetanus shot that contains the whooping cough component too. And current recommendations are that all adults get at least one booster with the whooping cough
I
component.
wasn't aware of that. So if you see a doctor every year or whatever for your health, you should ask them, do you think it's time for my tetanus shot?
You should ask, where's my last tetanus? Have I had the whooping cough component? And that's particularly important if you're going to be in contact with little children, babies that haven't been immunized yet. Pregnant women now get a whooping cough booster with every pregnancy. And
Even
that's,
when they're pregnant, it's safe?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, that's
Absolutely.
amazing. Now, does the diphtheria get included in the tetanus
Yes.
shot?
Yes, it's
So you're being immunized for 3 different diseases when you get that tetanus
when you get
shot.
that tetanus shot with the pertussis component, you're getting 3 different disease protections. When you get a regular tetanus shot, it's 2 different protections. Now, the situation's a little more complicated for people on Medicare because Medicare will not pay for the tetanus shot, the whooping cough component. It won't pay for it if you don't have an injury at all, but it won't pay for the pertussis component, period, which is a shortcoming in the Medicare program, if you want my opinion. But I've never had a politician call me and ask me my opinion, so I guess that's not so important.
This brings up what Dr. Cruz talked about, the autonomy of a physician. Years ago, if you decided this is right for the patient, you would just give it because you were autonomous. You were a good physician and you were doing your thing. You're losing your autonomy with all regulations, right? With many regulations.
We spend a lot of time battling with insurance companies for what we believe to be right, and that really does increase exhaustion and burnout and frustration because we spend a significant percentage of our time doing things that aren't directly taking care of people, and that is exhausting. That is very frustrating.
Yeah. So Medicare may not cover it, but even if
Yeah.
they don't, if you can afford it, it might be well worth it for you.
Particularly if you have grandchildren that you're trying to be in contact with to protect those grandchildren. It's a nice thing to do. So there's the whooping cough, the pertussis, the tetanus shot. That's a really good thing to make sure that you're up to date on. And that's something that everybody needs to do throughout their lifetime. Of course, this is flu season. We haven't seen an outbreak of flu yet. There's been one season in my career I can remember where we didn't get an outbreak of influenza, or at least not a significant outbreak.
Only one season in all your career.
In all my career, I can only
Okay.
remember 1 year where we didn't have a whole lot of influenza. Usually at some point in the season, we're run ragged with lots of people with influenza.
So watch out, it's coming,
So
right?
watch out. I'm really sure we're going to see it sometime here. It's not too late. Go get your flu shot. You can get it at the clinic. You can get it at the pharmacies. It's a good thing to do. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But it's the best thing we've got to prevent the flu, and it's worth it. So I've had mine. My children have had theirs. My husband has had his. Go get your flu shot. And that's something you need every year simply because the strains of the virus that circulate change, so we have to make a new vaccine every year to try to get the strain that's going to be circulating.
It's a guess.
It's a guess. Some
Yep.
years they guess beautifully and they have a good match, and other years not so much. But even in years where the match isn't very good, people who get their shot are less likely to die from complications of influenza. So it's worth getting your shot. Another thing that all adults should be thinking about, particularly when they get into their older years, is pneumonia shots. And there's actually 2 different pneumonia shots.
You know, can I cut you off?
Absolutely.
We're going to take a break because
Oh.
I want to hear. Well, I knew about the one pneumonia shot, and I've never heard about the second one, and I knew you wanted to talk about it. So, those of you who are listening, you know the different vaccines that Dr. Johnston has suggested, but even if you've had the pneumonia shot, you keep listening right after this break because you're going to find
Might
out
be another.
more than you knew.
We're clear.
Who is a family practice physician with the Avera Medical Group Brookings. Dr. Johnston has been filling us adults in on the vaccines that we need to prevent disease. You know what I found fascinating? I looked this up. I knew you wanted to talk about vaccines. And there was one comment that I had not thought of. Of course, a doctor would be well aware of this. But this, talking about vaccines, this article said you need to know the difference in medicines. Vaccine is a medicine. But the difference between vaccine and other medicines is that vaccines prevent rather than treat or cure a disease. That's really something to think about. You know, if you get a disease and there's meds to treat or cure it, good for you. But if you take a vaccine, you prevent it. That's pretty essential.
It's wonderful, and I think, you know, there's the old statement, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and that is so true, and my heart is really in preventative medicine. I think it's really important to talk about diet and exercise and calcium intake and healthy lifestyle, not smoking. I mean, all of those things that we know we should do to take care of ourselves, and vaccination is just a big part of that.
Well, I cut you off just before the break when you were talking about pneumonia. And
Yes.
what do you want to tell us about pneumonia vaccines?
So for my whole career, we've had a vaccine that we call the Pneumovax, and this is a pneumonia shot that protects people from certain strain of pneumonia, the most deadly strain that certainly caused a lot of deaths, particularly in the over 65 crowd. So my whole career, when somebody hits 65, we start trying to get them that shot, and some people are more accepting of it than others. And we also know that people with certain conditions need that shot sooner and a booster, and those would be people with chronic lung diseases, asthma, COPD, people with diabetes, this was an interesting one that I didn't realize until my own mother got a cochlear implant, but people that have cochlear implants or anything that kind of penetrates into the brain there. But in recent years, we've actually started recommending a second pneumonia shot. And this is something that about a year ago, Medicare actually came out and said, okay, we're going to pay for this for the over 65 crowd too. So this is a relatively new recommendation for the over 65 crowd. And people that are younger who are either because of their own medical condition, certain cancers, or because of things that we as doctors are doing to them, medicines that make their immune system not work very well, are immunocompromised. And this is a vaccine called Prevnar, and it helps protect from different strains of pneumonia. And this is a vaccine that actually we've been giving to little children, babies, almost my entire career. And this was a revolutionary medication when it came out because it really reduced the risk of pneumonia and meningitis and a lot of very serious illness in infants. And what the people that watched these things noticed was that when we started immunizing infants, the rates of adult hospitalizations with pneumonia went down. And the idea behind that is a very important concept we call herd immunity. And that's the concept that if there's enough people protected from an infection, they're not going to spread it to people that are vulnerable to it. And this is why vaccines are so important, and it's so important for everybody to get all of their shots, because my being protected protects you too. So the people who aren't vaccinating their children are endangering people who can't, or children who have conditions where their immune system isn't working. They have cancer, they have whatever disease it is, they're too little to get their shots yet. It's not just you that's taking the risk, it's everybody in the community that's getting the risk. So there's 2 pneumonia shots now, and everybody should get those 2. Ideally, they're given a year apart. So if you haven't had 2 different pneumonia shots, talk to your doctor about that.
I was just in to see Dr. Warren yesterday for a checkup, and his nurse said Prevnar 3 is now covered by Medicare. I said,
Yes.
It's interesting. We're going to talk about it on the show tomorrow. And she said, but you have to make sure you've had the first shot at least a year before,
At least a year before.
Medicare will
Yep.
cover it. So if you just had the first pneumonia shot for some reason, you're going to wait a year, and then you can get the second one.
And then you can get the second one, right?
Okay.
Right.
Cool.
And then I know we've got a question here, but there's one more shot that adults should really think about, and that's the shingles shot. Nobody wants shingles. I know they've had a lot of commercials on about this one. Anybody who had chickenpox is at risk for shingles. Shingles is the chickenpox virus waking up in your system again. The vaccine is certainly not our best vaccine at preventing the disease, but it is what it is really good at is preventing the pain that lasts and lasts and lasts after somebody has had shingles. So it's still a good thing to get. Medicare does not cover it, but many people's Part D plans does. So
Check
you can
that
get
out.
it. You can check that out. You can get it at the pharmacy, and people between the ages of 60 and 65, your insurance will usually cover it.
Okay, I've mentioned this on the show before when Dr. Holm has mentioned shingles, but I have to tell you, I'm one of 6 sisters, and my one sister got shingles. And weekly, she called the 5 sisters. Have you gotten your shot yet? I said, no, Kathleen, I'm fine, I'm healthy. You have to get that shot.
She's
And
right.
finally gave in, and I'm very thankful I did. But I was a little resistant. I said, I don't need another shot. Yes, you do. She
Yes,
said,
you
I
do.
have never been in this much pain in my entire life, and I don't want my sisters to go through it, and I'm not going to let up till every one of you get the shots.
Good for her.
So she didn't, and all of us got our shot, and none of us have had shingles. Poor
Good.
Kathleen, though, she really suffered.
And
She
that's
couldn't
it.
believe
People
she could
suffer
be that
terribly.
pain, that
Yeah.
much pain.
And the pain can last and last and last and last
Yeah.
long after the spots have healed up.
So keep that in mind. Kathleen may not be your sister, but she cares about you too. So get that shingle shot, please, please, please. Really important. You know, we're talking about immunizations, and a person called in, and this is a comment I know you often hear. Patients comment. This patient called in and said that the flu shot makes them sick. Please explain why this happens.
Oh, we hear this all
You
the time.
hear it all the time,
We
so
hear
talk
it
about it.
all the time. You know, certainly anytime you're activating the immune system, people can feel kind of run down, they can feel kind of achy, they can run some low-grade fevers. This is distinct from influenza, which is not what a lot of people call the flu, where you have a little bit of stomach upset, maybe a little bit of diarrhea. Actual influenza that we're trying to prevent with this, although there's a range of how sick people get with it, when I think influenza, people come in, they look like, I always like to say, death nobody bothered to warm over. They're pale, they're sweaty, they look absolutely exhausted. They will basically think, you know, I really have to go to the bathroom, but I can hold it longer because I'm too tired to get up. They hurt all over, they have headaches, they usually will run high fevers, they will have cough, congestion, sometimes they'll have some stomach effects with it, a little bit of vomiting or a little bit of diarrhea, but that's not usually a prominent part of it. And that exhaustion can last for a very long time, even after the fever is gone, even after the cough is gone. And the other really important thing about influenza is that it doesn't stop with influenza. Influenza is a high-risk situation. It damages the protective lining of the lungs. So it's a high-risk situation for coming down with pneumonia. It's a high-risk situation for ear infections, for sinus infections, for other serious infections. And people die from influenza or from complications of influenza. Previously healthy people die from influenza. So it is a serious infection. Now, does that happen often? No. Previously healthy people don't often die from influenza. But how many is too many? And in my opinion, one is too many. If I can prevent that one is too many.
So what do you tell these people when they say it makes them sick?
I say, well, yes, it can activate your immune system and make you feel kind of under the weather for a little while. But the other problem is we're giving the flu shot at a time when people are getting sick all the time anyway. So when somebody comes and gets their flu shot, I'll tell them, yep, if you're sick in the next 2 weeks, you're going to blame your flu shot. But the same percentage of people in the next 2 weeks are going to get sick whether they got their flu shot or not. The ones who got their flu shot blame the flu shot. The ones who didn't say, dang, I should have gotten that flu shot. So the flu shot, it can't make you sick. With the exception of the nasal vaccine, it's a dead virus. It can't make you sick. And the nasal vaccine is inactivated. It's a very weakened form of the virus. It can't make you sick, or if you're otherwise healthy, it's not going to make you sick either. Certainly there's the rare person who will have an allergic reaction, but even if you're allergic to eggs, it's quite possible that you can have the flu shot. So, don't rule it out. And I hear it all the time that the flu shot makes people sick, but
well, there are diehards that have held out until now, and maybe if they're listening to you, you might shift their concept of what a flu shot is.
The other thing to think about is, even if you don't want the flu shot, even if you don't think you need the flu shot, there are people around you that are more vulnerable to the flu than you are. So if you are going to be in contact with elderly people, if you go to the nursing home, if you're around little children, if you go to church, if you're around anybody whose immune system isn't working very well, you put them at risk if you get influenza. So think about getting your flu shot as a public act.
Very good. Well, we appreciate all your comments. Were you going to say something about it?
I was going to ask Dr. Johnson, how is it transmitted? Is it foam-like contamination? Is it droplets in the air?
It's droplets. It's very contagious. So people who are coughing or sneezing, and that gets aerosolized out into the air. It gets onto surfaces. I touch that surface. I rub my nose. So it's a very contagious illness. Yep, we all need some hand sanitizer.
As soon as he said it, I started rubbing my nose. It's such a habit. Your nose starts to itch.
You don't think about it. You just don't think about how now we're all using the hand sanitizer.
Thank you, Bob.
We just don't think about how often we touch things, and if somebody who's had the flu touches them too,
you're in trouble. You got it. Well, on that note, we really hope we've convinced everyone, if you haven't had that flu shot, have it. We've learned a lot about adult immunizations. We appreciate you listening. We're going to take our final break, and we'll be back right after these words. Back to Prairie Doc Radio. I've certainly enjoyed sharing this half hour with Dr. Deb Johnson, who is a family practice physician with the Avera Medical Group Brookings. For all of us listening, and an awful lot of the listeners are over 50, maybe even a little older than that, I think she's gotten through to us on how important immunizations are. They truly are. They just
Even
make
for
a
you.
world of difference.
Yes,
For all
they
of
do.
us,
For all
yes.
of us. Immunizations are, I really think immunizations are probably the greatest contribution medicine has made to public health, period. It's really an important thing. There's a lot of great things modern medicine has done, but vaccines are hugely important. So
Well, we're all a lot healthier because of them.
we certainly are.
Talking about being healthy and what can help us retain our healthiness, you had talked about before the program
Yeah,
about cold and or the
I was
sun,
the sun.
combination of both.
I was talking with one of my partners who had recently returned from vacation, and she and her family had visited other families someplace sunny, and I had commented and chided her a little bit because I saw a tan line, and she told me with some pride that had happened despite her sunscreen, but she had slathered her children up, and nobody else had gotten any tan, and so I was proud of her for that. It's really important for us to remember, especially those of us from cold climates here who might be going someplace warm for the summer or for the winter. A lot of listeners here may be going down to Arizona or Texas for a month, or Florida for a month,
Maybe.
or someplace. So it's important to remember to bring your sunscreen. You're really sunshine naive right now. But even those of us who are staying up here, there's a lot of that bright sunshine that's getting reflected off of that snow. So I try to recommend to my patients that they wear a moisturizer with a sunscreen in it on an everyday basis to protect your skin. It's important both in preventing skin cancer, but it's also really important at preventing skin aging. So, sometimes if you're not so worried about skin cancer, you'll be a little more apt to do it thinking, oh, maybe I'll have fewer wrinkles and spots if I do that. So that's an important thing to think about your sunscreen.
Okay. One other thing that came up, especially with my visit with Dr. Warren yesterday, his nurse said, we're now suggesting mammograms yearly. We didn't do it for a while, and we're back for older people. And I said, I stopped that pap smear, and I stopped all of that a few years ago. I haven't bothered. And Dr. Warren then explained the importance of, when you get to a certain age, you don't need the pap smears any longer. But breast cancer, he scared me with this because he said, your chance of getting breast cancer is 1 in 7. And the longer you live, the more
The higher
likelihood
your
you might
chances.
have it. I'm
Yeah.
thinking I got to an age where I shouldn't have to worry about either one of
No.
these. And I am absolutely wrong, correct?
You are absolutely wrong. The incidence of breast cancer, your risk of breast cancer goes up every year. So the older you are, the higher likelihood it is that you will get breast cancer. When we stop screening and looking for breast cancer is when we think that you're not going to outlive treatment
Thanks
anyway.
a lot. I'm
So
glad
it's a
they
good
wanted
thing.
me. It's a very good thing.
So if somebody has a bad heart and bad kidneys and is just really sick, then
not gonna push
I
it.
don't push screening for colon cancer or breast cancer or those kinds of things. But in healthy people, where I think you may be 80 years old, but golly, your parents both lived to be 95, and you're out there golfing every day, and you are just healthy as can be. I still encourage those women to get their mammograms. And pap smears are a little bit different. So the guidelines for pap smears are at age 65, you can stop having a pap smear provided that you've had 3 pap smears in the previous 10 years that have been normal, and at least one of those has to have been in the previous 5 years. I always add the caveat to that there's no new risk factors either, and that would mean that there's no new partners.
Right. Okay. Well, all good information, and we certainly hope you've enjoyed it. I know I have. As always, you can hear more from Dr. Holm online at prairiedoc.org. You may also learn more about the exciting activities of the Healing Words Foundation. Tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock on the South Dakota Public Television Network, On Call with the Prairie Doc will discuss the heart and the rhythm of life. Dr. Tarek Maruz, a cardiologist with North Central Heart in Sioux Falls, will be the guest host. It's a live program, so you can call in your questions, anything having to do with heart, and that will be tomorrow night, again, 7 o'clock on South Dakota Public TV. Thanks so much, Dr. Johnson. It's really been
Great
fun
to be here.
sharing this with you. If anyone would like to see this, we are on YouTube. If you pull up YouTube and go to Prairie Doc, you can see the live stream of this, and I believe they just keep them on YouTube. So you could have been watching while we talked. We're not excited about. No, we're okay with that, I guess. This is radio. You don't need to see us.
I'd have dressed up more.
Yeah,
I'd have known.
but if you want to see it, we are live streaming now on YouTube. Prairie Doc YouTube. That's it for this week. Thanks.
Thanks, Rick.